All right, hello world. This is a IndieHacker Lunch stream. So I have leftover Vietnamese wrap, and I am watching this video called CIA Secret Method for Transcending Space and Time, the Gateway Process, Part 1. And this is by the YouTube channel Morgue Official. This is by the channel Morgue Official on YouTube with 170,000 subscribers. And yeah, so I will be watching this and having this lunch, and
it brings in the concept of God known as the Absolute and discusses.
And the purpose of this is to enjoy this and to be present. And I dedicate the stream to sending peace and love to everybody in the world. Today is Sunday. It's a day of rest. So today, make sure you take some time to rest and recharge. And my message to the world today is that take care of yourself. If you ever have the sensation of the feeling like, hey, I'm feeling well and healthy and balanced, so all right, I think it's working now. I think it paused. So my message for the world is, like, if you ever feel that you're present and aware and feel good, then like that's a good vibration. Like notice that frequency, that vibration, and be grateful and notice it, so then you can be more aware, conscious of what makes you feel well and alive and what makes you feel rejuvenated. So let's watch this.
This is how we are all just different aspects of this mind beginning to evolve and understand itself through an internal hologram that it projects. It talks about encountering entities in other dimensions. There is just so much information in here, and I don't think I've really seen anyone do a full analysis on this before. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Now, I myself have had experiences with the gateway process. I'm not going to talk about it today, but if you guys would like me to talk about my experiences with the gateway process, let me know, and I'll do so at the end of this series. So also make sure that you do like and subscribe so that you'll be notified for when we talk about that and just all the subsequent parts of this. Because like I said, we're going to be talking about hypnosis, we're going to be talking about alternate dimensions, we're going to be talking about God/the Absolute. There's so much to go through here. Really, it's just an extremely intriguing document, some stuff that you need to know, stuff that you need to hear about, stuff that we talk about all the time. Now, let's just jump right into it. So this is, like I said, called the Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process. You can see, and this is addressed to the commander of the U.S. Army Operational Group. This is for the Department of the Army, and this is written by Wayne M. McDonald. So we're going to be taking a look at this first page here to see what's going on. And it says, you tasked me to provide an assessment of the gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. So they had this officer, this individual, tasked with understanding how the gateway process works and what it could be used for. So that was the mission, to determine how it works and how it could be used in the practical sense, what its practicality was. It continues, as I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why the process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. So we're going to see why this is an extremely involved and difficult business, is because it requires going into uncharted territories of the mind. And I just think that it's so fascinating to think about this individual who was tasked with this, probably going through this transformative experience as he goes through the gateway process and learns all this information about the mechanics of reality and starts to become intimately familiar with it. So it continues by saying, initially based on conversations with a physician who took the gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Itzhak Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. Now, this is very important for those who don't understand why quantum mechanics is so important to this. For those who do know what quantum mechanics is, you absolutely understand why. But for those who aren't familiar with quantum mechanics, please become familiar with quantum mechanics. This is a system that was developed in the early 1900s, and it's science's most successful theory. And it always blows my mind how so many people don't know what quantum mechanics is. So the idea that most people have about reality, where they picture reality as being atoms, as little hard bits of matter whizzing around and clumping together to form molecules and more complex structures and things like that, that is well over 100 years old. That's classical mechanics. If you view reality that way, that's an outdated model that's over 100 years old. Please, I beg of thee, look into quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is science's most successful theory. It's the current model of reality that science uses, and it is basically, in a nutshell, I'm going to explain it very, very simply. It shows that at base, reality is not material, but rather based on waves, wave functions, that particles can communicate with each other instantly, and the reason why that's interesting information is because it shows that this is a non-local reality. Basically, that distances are an illusion because you can have instantaneous communication without signals being sent. It was the founder of quantum mechanics, Max Planck, said, "As a man who has devoted my entire life to the most clear-headed science, I can tell you as a result of my research this much: matter does not exist." And the mind is the ultimate form of reality. It's a mental reality, not a material reality. So this is why quantum mechanics is important to this. And this is why it's important to understand quantum mechanics. So he had to look at he's talking about everything that he had to do to understand the gateway process. Because remember, this gateway process is sort of like what is the gateway process? Just in case I didn't explain it clearly enough, just to have that foundation. The gateway process is a technique to allow one to enter into a mode of mind that allows one access to out-of-body experiences or alternate dimensions or connecting to the source. It puts one in sort of that mode where you can tune into different aspects of reality. It's kind of like, an example would be, if you're watching TV, and let's say you're watching a streaming service like Netflix. Well, you're tuned into Netflix. What the gateway experience does is it kind of brings you back to your home screen where you can pick different streaming services. Well, you can pick Netflix, or you can choose Amazon Prime, or you can choose, Disney Plus, or whatever. Our reality is sort of like the Netflix analog. We are tuned into this universe, what we call the holos, this reality. The gateway process kind of pulls you back to the home screen so you can select a different channel in a certain way. It's not that clean, it's not that easy. It's very muddied and hard to control and distorted and things.
Very interesting. I just had to correct my phone streaming setup so that it's connected to the wall, to the outlet. And now let's return to this. Very interesting. Taking an introduction to the gateway process. Let's watch.
Bleed through.
And by the way, if you're joining, I am having a lunch here, some leftover Vietnamese wrap, and the purpose of this is to watch this and enjoy and learn about this and enjoy some food. So follow along.
But that's essentially kind of like one way to understand it. I'm trying to put a very complex process in a metaphor. It's not completely right, but it's along those lines. Because some people are like, well, isn't the gateway process for having out-of-body experiences? Or isn't the gateway process for reaching alternate? Well, it's for all these different things. It's to access different modes of existence, different modes of reality. So he had to look into quantum mechanics, biomedical models. I had to dive into quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway. So what is this brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway? What is this reference? This references. So how does the gateway process work? The gateway process works in a number of different ways. There's a number of different techniques involved, including like visualization and breath work and things like this. But it also uses binaural beats as well, which is basically sending audio signals to your brain through one frequency in one ear and another frequency in another ear to be able to get your brain to basically the right and left hemispheres beginning to synchronize. And they call this hemisync, hemisphere synchronization, hemisync. And this is, in their theory, what allows one to enter into a mode where they can access different realities in different dimensions by getting the right and left hemispheres of the brain to synchronize in a specific, very specific way. And so your right and left hemisphere of the brain are associated with different ways of functioning. And so, like, for example, when it comes to language, your left hemisphere is associated with the structure and syntax of language, how language is structured and organized according to linguistic rules, whereas your right brain is associated with the meaning of the words. See, a lot different. But the right and left hemispheres need to work together for you to understand sentences. You need to understand the structure and rules of language, but you also need to understand its meaning as well. So you need your right and left hemisphere to be working in a certain way to be able to access the meaning of language. Right, what this attempts to do is to sync the right and left hemisphere of the brain in a certain way so that one can begin to access a different mode of existence. So we're going to see that this relies on the idea that reality is not material, but rather mental, and that you are not a brain or a body, but rather you are a system of energy, a system of frequency, a system of mental energy, and that your brain and body are just methods, are just vehicles, are just tools that your eternal self uses to access this reality and access this domain. It is the vehicle. It is the gateway, so to speak, you could say, from the mental reality to the physical reality. It's what allows you to move and operate in the so-called localized domain. But as we go forward, we're going to see that all that changes. That none of this is physical, and none of this is material. So he had to look into all these things. He says, once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science, to remove the stigma of its occult connotations, and to put it in a frame of reference suited to objective assessment. So essentially he's saying, look, all this stuff has been associated with the occult. What I'm trying to do is put it in terms of science so that it can be understood objectively and without all the connotations that come to this. But you can see what I really want you to understand about this, and this is super important. I talk a lot about how to achieve a higher state of consciousness, how to achieve hyper-awareness in my videos. And it's not about just sitting around and meditating all day. There are three main components to it: metacognition, concept networking, and phenomenological experience. So the gateway process and the gateway process itself and things like meditation, etc., that goes under the category of phenomenological experience. It's important, but there's two other categories that are necessary. Metacognition, which is thought reflecting upon itself, and this relates to know thyself, and also concept networking. So what is concept networking? Concept networking is being able to see how apparently disparate subjects that apparently have nothing to do with each other, actually all connect and are different aspects of the same thing. And this is kind of what he's saying here. He's saying, look, I had to look into all these different subjects: theoretical physics, quantum mechanics, biomedical models, occult, to be able to describe what is going on here. And this is the idea that whether you're looking at philosophy or the occult or esoterica or quantum mechanics or physics or artistic expression or whatever category that you want to pick, you are simply looking at one aspect of existence, but it all connects together. Like a philosopher, a physicist, and an occultist would probably all dislike each other and think that each one is wrong in a certain capacity. Now, not always. There's some open-minded physicists, there's some open-minded philosophers, there's some open-minded occultists, but in general, right, in general, they would all likely disagree with each other very, very deeply. But the thing is, they're all just seeing a different aspect of existence. And then there's also the expressive aspects of existence too, like art and sex and music and all these different parts that also all connect. They're just different expressions of that one underlying holistic thing. So the great example is the blind man and the elephant. If a bunch of blind men who have never seen an elephant before go and touch an elephant to try and figure out what an elephant is, the guy or person who touches the foot is going to think that the elephant is like a tree. The one who touches the tail is going to think it's like a rope. The one who touches the ear is going to think it's like a blanket. The one who touches the trunk is going to think it's like a snake. And they're all going to think that the elephant, they're all going to argue with each other and think it's something different, when it's all actually just one thing. They're seeing it from the different aspects. So concept networking is extremely important for building a holistic model of reality, and we call this the analog all. It's the development of your internal model of all existence. You need this to reach a higher state of consciousness. You need...
The camera keeps going in and out. I think it's because it's on low battery. Now he's talking about how there are different ways of understanding reality through mystical experience, through physics, and through art, perhaps through experience. And they're all doing it in different approaches. And he's using comparing it to like a blind man trying to describe an elephant and really feeling different parts of the elephant. So. Now I will have some fruit and yogurt, and let's keep going. Very interesting, super interesting.
You need this to ultimately reach hyper-awareness. You need to develop the analog all, just like you need to develop the analog I to develop self-awareness. You, as a child, when you were developing self-awareness, you developed the idea, the model of yourself, and you could think about, oh, this is me. I can put myself in various scenarios. You achieve self-awareness. Analog all requires concept networking to develop, and it's part of reaching a higher consciousness. So anyway, this is a good example of concept networking. And you can see that this individual is going to be engaging in a lot of different categories here. So this individual is going to be engaging in categories that would ultimately get one to a higher state of consciousness. They're going to engage in metacognition, thought reflecting upon itself. They're going to be engaging in concept networking, how disparate subjects connect to a unifying pattern. And this individual is actually taking the gateway process, so they will be involved in phenomenological experience, having that experience of it, rather than just an understanding, but also having that experience. So...
Hello and welcome to VAST. I wanted to make a quick video to show you how to use the GLX desktop, which is software that is really cool for running a remote desktop.
The individual continues by saying, I began the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental biomolecular factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation, so that their objectives and modes of functioning could be compared in the reader's mind with the gateway experience as the model of its underlying mechanics was developed. Additionally, that introductory material is useful in supporting the conclusions of this paper. I indicate that at times, these related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the gateway experience. So, saying that things like hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation could be helpful to accelerate the gateway process, to be able to make it more effective in a faster amount of time. So Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaint about the obtuse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical." The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualizations that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left-brain linear thinking. So to borrow Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right-brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I am confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rational critique. So what he's saying is essentially what you're going to come across and I'm going to talk about are going to challenge your beliefs. He's writing to the Department of the Army here, and he's like, hey, this is going to require an open mind. It's going to really challenge what you have been conditioned to believe in that left brain, logical, linear mode of thinking. You're going to require some open-mindedness. You're going to require some right brain intuition. But ultimately, this will stand up to rational critique. So he's saying, there's nothing crazy about this. This is not magical. This is not a miracle. This is ultimately rational. This ultimately has a rational basis, but people have been so conditioned to think of the world in a certain way, it's going to require open-mindedness, it's going to require some intuition to really get a grasp, to really get a feel for what we are talking about here. And this is important to understand and why we emphasize the importance of intuition and reason. So intuition is really important because it gives us incredible insights into the underlying mechanics of reality and our own minds and our inner selves. However, intuition, it can be wildly chaotic. You're dealing in the mode of the right brain unconscious connections. And so we require reason to ground us. We require reason to filter. What reason does is filters and grounds these intuitions so that it doesn't go off into realms that can. A lot of people who study occult and stuff, they kind of go crazy because they start to believe in stuff that they get so immersed in intuition and they have no rational basis and no rational grounding. They start being unable to tell what is real and what is not real. For example, starting to believe that, let's say, archetypes are actual beings, and I mean, that's very complicated. I don't really want to get into that today. But you might start believing in, I don't know, there's just so many crazy concepts in New Ageism, like multiverse and contacting ascended masters and all this stuff that needs to be rigorously processed through reason. Now, this doesn't mean to be closed-minded. You just don't want to be so open-minded that your mind falls out. You want to be able to have a connection to intuitively connected to the source, but also be rationally grounded. And that's what's missing today is most spiritualists, occultists, esotericists, all that, they're all intuition, hardly any reason. But then on the other side of the fence, you have a lot of philosophers and physicists and scientists who are all reason and have no intuition. And then so they become very rigid and mechanical and they don't have that material. It's like intuition provides this rich material, whereas reason organizes it, connects it, filters it, puts it in a pattern that makes sense. So anyway, long story short, this is ultimately rational, is what he is saying, but you're going to need to be open-minded. So he continues by saying, paradoxically, having gone to such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on an occult or dogmatic frame of reference, in the end, I found it necessary to return at least briefly to the question of the impact of the gateway experience on common belief systems. And see, I love this because he's encountering what happens with concept networking. He's like, paradoxically, ironically, I took very great lengths to avoid judgments based on occult frames of references. But in the end, I found it necessary to return to what this has to do with common belief systems. And you're going to see this is when he brings in like the concept of the absolute in terms of God and how many different mystical systems throughout the ages have intuitively understood aspects of this. But remember, the concept of God is the absolute, and we're going to discuss when we bring this in, it's nothing like the God of the Bible or the Christian God. Like that version of God is absurd. I grew up in a strict Christian household. I have RTS, religious trauma syndrome. I absolutely reject the idea of a theistic God. We're going to see that the absolute, in the Hegelian sense, is what we are, that we are gods in that we are the absolute, having an experience of ourselves in our own self-generated reality. And this is what allows us to be able to hack ourselves and access different aspects of reality, because ultimately this is an expression and projection of ourselves, and we can hack it and access different areas of it. Just like when we go to sleep and dream, if we become lucid and do different techniques, we can access different areas and different modes of being within our dream. This is a collective dream. We can access different modes and areas within this collective dream because we are God. We are literally God. We are the absolute, coming to know itself, through the modality of human beings. So he's going to come back to talking about the impact on religion.
That's powerful. Modality of human beings We are God coming to know itself through the modality of human beings. Fascinating. So, let's go.
And he says, I did so because although it was essential to avoid attempting to render an assessment in the context of such systems, I felt that it was necessary after having completed the analysis to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems. Unless that point is clearly established, the danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and it is therefore alien to all that they hold to be right and true. So what he's saying is, what I wanted to do at the end is show how this is compatible with religion. And he said because he's afraid that basically religious people will see this and think that it's a sin or evil or something like this and reject it. But of course, someone who is very dogmatically adherent to their belief system is going to reject something like this because it does challenge their belief systems. You would have to be a very open-minded individual to adopt something like this into your belief system. So essentially, he's just saying at the end, I'm going to talk about how this relates to like spiritual concepts. So he concludes by saying, this is certainly not designed to be the last word on the subject, but I hope that the validity of its basic structure and of the fundamental concepts upon which it is based will make it a useful guide for other personnel who are required to take the gateway training or work with gateway material. So anyone else who's going to take this training, any other personnel, this is going to be their guide. And signs it Wayne M. McDonald. And that was just the cover page. And then, so now we get into the actual introduction and then beginning to discuss the concept of hypnosis. Now, in the introduction, it says, in order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, that is the gateway experience, involving brain hemisphere synchronization, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlie operation of related methods such as hypnosis. So, what we're going to do is talk about hypnosis in the next section. In the next section, we will be discussing hypnosis. Right now, we have laid the groundwork for what we will be discussing in this series. And if you have questions, if you have comments, put them in the questions right in the comments right now, and make sure you stay liked and subscribed because we are going to go through this document. There's 30 pages in this document. So what I want you to do in the comments, tell me if you want me to go through every single page, or if you want me to just pick highlights. Let me know. Tell me what you like in the comments. Either way, stay subscribed, hit like so that you can follow this. There's so much interesting information, and this wasn't even the introduction. This was just the cover letter. So it's going to be really good. Remember, if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It really helps out a lot. You get access to secret videos, secret live streams, and I want to give a shout out to everyone who does support. Another great way that you can support is by hitting the join button right below this video here on YouTube. Today we are discussing this.
Amazing. This was the intro to the gateway process assessment by CIA, and I've been going back and forth to turn on the camera because the phone keeps falling asleep, and I can't really find the setting where to prevent it from falling asleep. Maybe it's because it's in battery saving mode, and that's why. But I just had some fruit and yogurt and finished leftover wraps, and it's 4 p.m. and I will end the live stream here. But to conclude on this